There are fewer images more quintessentially British than our waterways, but what lies beneath may disturb this picturesque stereotype. Charles Tyler is Professor of Environmental Biology at the University of Exeter's School of Bioscience. For many years, his leading research has examined whether so-called endocrine-disrupting chemicals could be responsible for changes in the sexual makeup of fish.
We've been working on this group of chemicals which modify the hormone system in the bodies of organisms. Now, for the most part, we've been focused working on fish. And this really came about from the findings that male fish living in British rivers were starting to show female responses, feminized traits essentially, and they were growing eggs within the testis. And then we were able to pin that down to exposure to effluent from wastewater treatment works, from sewage treatment works. And further work then went on to identify what those chemicals were. And those chemicals included natural sterile lesions derived from women, included compounds from the contraceptive pill like ethinyl estradiol and from hormone replacement therapies, but also other compounds and chemicals which we use in our everyday lives. And what they do is they mimic one of the body's hormones called estrogen, essentially, and they alter the way that organism grows and develops sexually. And that's why these male fish were producing these eggs within the testis.
Human health issues like low sperm count and hormone-related cancers have been linked to these chemicals, but no unequivocal evidence has provided a definitive link. Yet Professor Tyler's research has been prompting a great deal of interest, support and funding from stakeholders.
You can imagine if you've got sex, chemicals and pollution linked to your research, and there's a lot of interest from lots of parties essentially, and because the fact it also has this potential link with human health as well, then of course research councils have been fundamental in terms of funding much of our work, but also we've had very wide stakeholder engagement. So we've had the Environment Agency very much been proactive, DEFRA for example, so people involved with policy and policy formulation. We've had industries involved like pharmaceutical companies for example, but also other companies, chemical producing companies like pesticide companies for example, because of course they're very concerned in terms of what the potential impacts of these chemicals are within the environment. So very wide stakeholder engagement.
Funding from NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council, has also ensured that the University of Exeter's School of Bioscience continues to lead the research.
We're trying to improve environmental quality standards. So the data and information that we've developed to date to show that these chemicals are involved with these disruptive processes has been sufficient to drive something called an endocrine disruption demonstration program, where they're looking to improve the treatment of effluents going into rivers to reduce the amount of these chemicals being discharged into the environment. So that's one key area we're working with the regulators and with the water authorities and with the Environment Agency to see through. So, and that's been rather nice to actually see from some fundamental research has led to a real impact in terms of improving environmental quality standards. The other area which we're really keen to develop and grow and have been for the last couple of years is to really try to understand how these chemicals cause the effect. These so-called endocrine disrupting chemicals can mediate the effect through lots of different pathways, and if we're using molecular tools and techniques like gene arrays, so ways you can look at how the whole genome responds to these chemicals to try and work out the pathways of effect. Because if we can do that, we can potentially better safeguard about similar chemicals that we discharge into the environment.
In an esteemed career dedicated to such specific research, Professor Tyler's work continues to assist the chemical industry, as well as those forming environmental policy and regulation to ensure a safe future for us all.